The brass tone of the church bell in Oakhaven rang every Sunday morning at 8 sharp. It was a heavy, resonant sound, cutting clean to the mountain-chilled Idaho high country and echoing off the timbered ridges. For 3 years, Reverend Gabriel Cole had pulled that hemp rope himself. He was a soft-spoken man of 35, built tall and broad like a lodgepole pine, with steady brown eyes and hands that looked as though they had been shaped by a lifetime of splitting oak and hauling slate before ever holding a leather-bound Bible. Oakhaven was a rough, borderline settlement carved into pines, filled with men who lived and died by the iron at their hips. In a territory where even the schoolmasters kept a nickel-plated derringer tucked into their waistcoats, Gabriel walked the mud-choked boardwalks completely unarmed. He never wore a sidearm. When drunken miners brawled outside the Golden Spur Saloon, smashing glass and flashing Bowie knives, Gabriel didn't reach for a revolver. He stepped directly between them. His voice was low, firm, and carried a quiet, undeniable authority that made full-grown killers drop their fists into the mud. The townspeople didn't just respect him, they revered him. To the widows up on the ridge, Gabriel was split firewood and sacks of flour delivered before dawn. To the orphans sleeping in the back of the mercantile, he was warm wool blankets and soft words of comfort. Only one thing about Reverend Cole ever invited curious whispers among the locals: the thick, jagged white scar that ran across the back of his right hand, stretching from his knuckles clean down to his wrist. Whenever anyone asked about it over a cup of black coffee, Gabriel would simply offer a gentle, faint smile, adjust his dark clerical coat, and say that God had pulled him from an old fire before he learned to preach his word. On a crisp October morning, the sanctuary was filled with a scent of cedar shavings, damp wool, and beeswax candles. Gabriel stood behind the heavy oak pulpit, his Bible open to the Psalms, looking out over a room filled with families who had found peace under his care. But as he raised his hand to deliver the morning grace, the Sunday peace shattered. The heavy front doors didn't just swing open, they burst inward, crashing against the pine walls with a sound like a rifle shot. 3 men stepped over the threshold into the central aisle, their heavy riding boots caked in red clay, bringing with them the sharp, suffocating stench of horse sweat, stale whiskey, and trail dust. At their center stood Vance, the Iron Holcomb, a notorious syndicate enforcer who had terrorized the cattle trails from Cheyenne to the Rogue River. Flanking him were 2 heavily armed gunmen, their leather dusters pulled back deliberately to reveal the polished staghorn handles of twin Colt .45s. The sanctuary instantly froze. The warmth bled out of the room. Mothers reached out with trembling hands, pulling their children down behind the pine pews. "Pardon the interruption, folks," Holcomb sneered, his voice dropping into the silent church like poison into a clear well. "We ain't here for the collection plate. We're here for the devil hiding behind that pulpit." Gabriel stood at the wooden altar. He did not flinch. His broad hands rested flat against the open pages of his scriptures. "You are welcome in the house of the Lord, Mr. Holcomb," Gabriel said, his tone perfectly even, "but leave your weapons at the door." Holcomb let out a dry, cruel laugh that echoed off the high rafters. He took 3 deliberate, heavy steps down the center aisle, his spurs clicking against the floorboards, his small eyes tracking Gabriel with cold recognition. "Look at him," Holcomb mocked, turning his head slightly toward the terrified congregation. "Look at your holy man. You think he came out of the east on a grace boat?" Holcomb closed the distance, stepped onto the chancel platform, and unholstered his revolver. With a practiced, vicious flick of his wrist, he forced the cold iron tip of the barrel under Gabriel's chin, tilting his head back. Gabriel's brown eyes remained steady, unblinking and devoid of fear. Then Holcomb's gaze drifted down. It landed on Gabriel's right hand resting flat against the altar wood. The sunlight streaming through the stained glass window illuminated the jagged white, seemed running across his knuckles. Holcomb's mocking smile vanished instantly, his face drained of color. "I'll be damned," Holcomb whispered, a sudden bead of cold sweat breaking across his temple. "It is you, the ghost of the Snake River, Captain Frank Vance." A collective gasp rippled through the pews. Frank Vance was a name spoken only in hushed tones across the territory. The legendary, cold-blooded leader of the Rogue River Regulators, an outlaw brotherhood that had fought a savage range war 6 years prior before vanishing into thin air. Holcomb leaned in close, his voice thick with malicious triumph. $40,000 in syndicate gold bullion vanished the night our outfit burned. The syndicate owns this county now, Frank, and you're going to open your vault or we burn this church down with every soul locked inside it. Was Gabriel right to keep his violent past a secret from people who trusted him, or did his lie put the entire town of Oakhaven in danger? What would you have done in his shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Gabriel stared directly into the eyes of the man, holding iron to his throat. Slowly, the warm, gentle posture of the town preacher faded away. His shoulders set, his frame hardened, and when he spoke, his voice dropped into a register the town of Oakhaven had never heard before, flat, icy, and sharp as a razor. "You took my brother's life, Vance," Gabriel said quietly. The room grew so silent that the creak of the hanging oil lamps sounded like breaking bones. "You took the gold, you set the fire, and you left me under the ash," Gabriel continued, the words measured and lethal. "I buried my past in that valley. I buried Frank Vance 6 feet deep, and I took up the cross so I would never have to put another man in the ground." 6 years ago, Gabriel hadn't simply walked away from a life of crime. Holcomb, his own trusted lieutenant, had staged a bloody mutiny. Holcomb had set fire to their headquarters, trapping Gabriel's younger brother inside the burning timber to steal the syndicate chest. Gabriel had clawed through the flaming wreckage with his bare hands, trying to save the boy, a desperate act that left his right hand burned to the bone, leaving the jagged white scar he carried to this day. Holcomb bared his teeth in a snarl. "Where's the bullion, Frank? Where did you hide the gold?" "There is no gold, Vance," Gabriel replied softly, looking past the gun barrel toward the frightened eyes of the widows he had fed and the orphans he had sheltered. "I gave it all away, every single dollar, to the orphanages in Boise, to the widows of the homesteaders we broke. I poured every cent of that blood money back into the earth to heal what we tore apart." Holcomb's face twisted into an ugly, rage-filled mask. "Then you just signed their death warrants. Draw your weapon, preacher." "I don't carry iron, Vance," Gabriel said smoothly. "I haven't touched a gun in 6 years." "Then you die on your knees," Holcomb screamed, stepping back and pulling the hammer of his Colt all the way back until it locked with a deadly double click. Gabriel stood completely motionless behind a wooden pulpit. He had taken a sacred vow never to pick up a gun again, but he had also known that evil rarely stays buried in the West. He had prepared for this exact moment from the day he laid the foundation logs of the church. Before Holcomb's finger could squeeze the trigger, Gabriel slammed his scarred right hand straight down onto a hidden brass latch concealed beneath the altar lip. The heavy front panel of the oak pulpit sprang open with a sharp, heavy snap. When evil forces a man into a corner, does taking up the gun invalidate his vow of peace, or is protecting the innocent the ultimate act of sacrifice? Let us know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this chapter, please take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to Sarah's Wild West Chronicles so you never miss another dramatic legend from the American frontier. The front of the altar sprang open with a sharp, heavy crack, the wooden panel swinging down on custom iron hinges. In a single fluid motion, a movement so blindingly fast it defied human sight, Gabriel's scarred right hand gripped the cold steel handles of his late brother's dual nickel-plated Remingtons. He didn't draw like a reckless saloon brawler. He moved with the terrifying mechanical precision of a master gunman who had spent a decade in the shadows. Crack! Crack! 2 lightning shots shattered the sacred quiet of the sanctuary. The heavy lead rounds caught Holcomb's 2 flankers square in their chest before their Colts could clear leather. The sudden impact drove both gunmen backward into the pine pews, their weapons clattering uselessly across the floorboards as they collapsed into the aisle. Holcomb shrieked in terror, diving headfirst behind a heavy oak lectern. He blindly shoved his revolver around the edge, firing wild, panic shots into the chancel. Lead tore through the altar, splintering the massive wooden cross hanging above Gabriel's head and showering the platform in oak shards. Gabriel rolled across the chancel floor with practiced ease. Coming up on one knee, he brought up both nickel-plated barrels, laying down a disciplined, rhythmic wall of suppressive fire. Heavy lead tore through the oak pews, chewing to the timber just inches from Holcomb's face, pinning the syndicate enforcer in a shower of flying splinters and gun smoke. "Outside! Get outside!" Holcomb screamed, his voice cracking in sheer desperation as he scrambled backward toward the side exit, clutching his bleeding arm where a wooden splinter had caught him. He shoved open the door and threw himself into the bright morning sun. Gabriel stood tall amidst the swirling clouds of gray-gin smoke. His face was unreadable, his eyes burning with a cold, absolute focus. He turned to the crying, cowering congregation, his voice dropping back into its familiar, calm, and reassuring tone. "Stay inside," Gabriel said softly. "Lock the heavy doors behind me." He didn't wait for an answer. Gabriel stepped off the chancel platform, pushed open the side door, and walked out onto the church porch alone. Gabriel stepped onto the elevated wooden porch, his long black clerical coat billowing in the mountain wind, held steady in his hands with the twin nickel-plated Remingtons, their barrels smoking against the crisp October air. Standing in the mud-choked street below were Sheriff Miller and 4 corrupt deputies, their revolvers already drawn and pointed straight at the church steps. Beside them stood a frantic, bleeding Holcomb, his face twisted in a desperate, rat-like fury. "He's a murderer," Miller yelled toward the frightened townspeople peering out from behind the boardwalk posts. "He just shot 2 men inside the house of God. Shoot him down." Gabriel didn't retreat behind the porch pillars. He walked down the wooden steps, one by one, his boots heavy against the pine, stepping straight into the red clay of Main Street. "Sheriff Miller." Gabriel's voice boomed across the entire settlement, echoing off the high pine ridges like thunder. "You bear a 10 star paid for by the blood of innocent settlers and syndicate gold. Drop your weapons or face the judgment you delayed for 6 years." Miller hesitated. His hand trembled against his holster as he stared into the preacher's unblinking brown eyes and noted the cold, deadly balance of his frame. The 4 deputies exchanged frantic, terrified glances. They weren't looking at a soft-spoken country parson anymore. They were looking at the ghost of the Snake River, a legendary killer who had survived fire, betrayal, and a range war. One deputy unbuckled his gun belt and let it drop into the thick mud with a heavy splash. Then another followed. "Shoot him, you fools!" Holcomb shrieked, driven by pure panic. Holcomb reached into his boot, whipped out a concealed backup Derringer, and snapped a wild shot. The small brass bullet tore clean through Gabriel's left shoulder, ripping the fabric of his black coat and staining his pristine white clerical collar with crimson. Gabriel didn't stumble. He didn't even flinch. A single, final shot from Gabriel's right hand, the hand bearing the white scar of betrayal, echoed through the mountain canyon. The round struck Holcomb square in the center of his chest. The syndicate leader was slammed backward into red clay, his Derringer slipping from his lifeless fingers as the light faded from his eyes forever. Sheriff Miller dropped to his knees in the mud, throwing both hands into the air as the townspeople surged off the boardwalks, armed with pitchforks, axe handles, and hunting rifles, surrounding the remaining corrupt deputies in a wall of furious unity. The lingering echo of gunshots died away, replaced by the whisper of the mountain wind, blowing gray, getting smoke up into the pine timber. Gabriel stood alone in the center of Main Street. Blood dripped steadily from his left shoulder, running down the sleeve of his dark coat, but his hands remained as still as stone. He slowly pulled back the hammers, uncocked both Remingtons, and set them down gently on the mounting block outside the church porch. He pulled a clean white handkerchief from his breast pocket and pressed it firmly against his shoulder wound. Old Silas, the town apothecary, rushed forward from the crowd, carrying a brass basin of clean water and fresh bandages. "Reverend Gabriel, good Lord, what do we do now?" Gabriel looked up at the jagged peaks of the Idaho mountains, then back toward the church steps where the heavy oak doors were slowly swinging open. The congregation stepped out into the warm morning sunlight, widows, orphans, miners, and shopkeepers, looking at their preacher not with fear, but with profound gratitude. "Now, Silas," Gabriel said softly, a faint, weary smile breaking across his face. "We sweep the sanctuary, we mend the shattered pews, and we give thanks for the peace we fought to keep." He turned and walked slowly back up the wooden steps. He was no longer just a preacher, and no longer an outlaw hiding from his sins, but the true shepherd who had stood between the wolves and his flock. What did you think of Reverend Gabriel Cole's final stand on the streets of Oakhaven? Did he prove that true faith is about protecting the innocent, no matter the cost? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this dramatic frontier tale, please hit the like button and subscribe to Sarah's Wild West Chronicles. Your support allows us to continue bringing you the absolute best, most authentic legends of the American West. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time out on the trail.